Brought to you by Chris Corsack, bookseller. D&D, all RPGs, buys and sells. If you got something you want to get rid of, talk to him. You're looking for something, check him out. RPG.com. Pretty easy. All right. Now, to explain a little bit about what's been going on and what happened last week. Some friends of mine made me a nice little 6-second animated intro type thing. And because I'm tired of being caught gobbing at the camera. So we figured out how to put it all together, and then we compressed it back together, and they still wouldn't take it. So we don't know what we're doing wrong yet, so we're just going to continue doing it this way until we figure out what we're doing, and then it'll look spiffier. And what a red letter day that'll be. Speaking of red letter days, I sure hope yours was better than mine today. Took my first check from my first advertiser, spent it all on toner for my laser printer, which is now broken. Something went wrong while I was changing it. So luckily I have another printer that's just hideously expensive to use. So that's what I'll be using until I get my other one fixed. And then to top it off, my wife Cheryl and I went and got our flu and our pneumonia shots today. And I'm telling you what, the flu shot went in pretty easy and the pneumonia kind of burned. Flu shot hurts like hell right now, and I don't even know I got that one. So it's been a day. Got lots of interesting things to talk about. A few reminders. If you aren't a subscriber to the channel, please do. I get topics to talk about on this channel from your feedback on the videos themselves, or on the my page has a hey, give me some ideas of what you want to talk about thing on it. And I'm even thinking about setting up a Facebook page for the Curmudgeon so that all the responses can go there. So that's where we're at right now. And I got some things left over from last week and some new things to talk about. The first one's rather interesting. Did working on D&D ever close any doors for you? Yep. It certainly did. I found myself looking for work with the only explanation for my last 5 years was doing these crazy dragon book things that nobody understood, and half the people thought were some sort of devil worship or Satanism or some horrible shit like that. Excuse me. So yeah, it was a problem, and I didn't find any work for almost a year. I was applying all over southern Wisconsin, even went down into Chicago on a couple of interviews, and just couldn't sell my background. What I had done. I couldn't even sell my editing or proofreading skills because they weren't willing to look at the products that we had done. I even had some in my briefcase, but they take a look at the cover and go, ew. So yeah, that worked against me for a while. Like I said, I was unemployed for almost a year, and then Glenn Kidd from Ralph Partha called me up out of the blue and said, hey, let's come make a magazine in Cincinnati. And so I got back into the business for a while. And then the next one was James M. Ward, the early days. Did you work with him much? No. Jim was still teaching school while I was there, and I gotta take these off, they're glaring, sorry. Jim was still teaching school. I saw him around a lot, and he was involved in playtesting and stuff, but I never formally worked with Jim as employees of TSR. All right, we're gonna save that one for last, my archetypal dungeon. Yeah, you're gonna find out it's probably not what you thought. Okay, advice for would-be game writers and rules writers. This person I happen to know from other chat pages. If you want a lot of backstory stuff on old D&D, I've got oh Lord, must be close to 200-page lock threads you can go look at on dragonsfoot.org, and there's a lot of information about the old days and how we did this and how we did that. I went to video because after my chemo, my fingers made it too hard to type for about a year. Still are difficult. Anyway, he liked the favorite story when Gary and I worked on AD&D for 6+ days. And he says, as I type this, I'm working on something like that for AD&D. In other words, OD&D plus the dragon equaled AD&D. AD&D plus the dragon equaled what? And then, do I have any general advice for writers, editors, project managers? Oh, yeah. And most of it you're not going to like. And I have no individuals in mind on either side of this coin that I'm going to flip here in a minute at you. The best advice I can say is do it for yourself or do it as a hobby project for your buddies. Unless you have something really new, a new venue or a new method or system, it is getting to the point where what's left to do? Okay, we have RPGs where you can all be rabbits. We have RPGs that's Bunnies and Burrows coming out with Frog Gods. We have Harvesters from Troll Lord Games, and they're all, you play anthropomorphic. That's a good word not to stumble over when you got a dry mouth. Animals in it. I wrote one where everybody got turned into mice for the duration of the adventure. But look, I got 10 sitting here that we didn't get around to, weren't able to publish at Eldritch. I know that a lot of stuff I do is a lot different than everybody else's because people that see it tell me that. But the money isn't there. We had 4 of the best writers, designers, producers, layout guys in the business going for Eldritch. And we ran out of cash long before we could establish enough cash flow to keep us afloat. Write it for small publication. Write it for a web page. Write it for yourself and put it on your web page. Make sure you self-copyright it. Put a copy in the envelope and send it and get it, postmarked when it comes back to you, and do all those little things if you don't want to spend the money right away to copyright it with the Library of Congress, which we found out is a very involved and very expensive process. If you think you really have something great, put it down for 3 weeks, go back, read it through again. If you still think it's great, then you got to figure out, okay, which companies inventory is my product most likely to fit into. Okay, is it real medieval? Is it real fantastical? Is it real sci fiction? Whatever. But good Lord, there's just not that much money out here. Believe me, if there was, I'd be doing more of it. But it just doesn't pay, just doesn't pay. So my advice is do it as a hobby. Don't break your heart figuring it's going to be the next great system. I get asked several times a year if I'm interested in helping somebody with this or something with that. And occasionally it might sound a bit intriguing and say, tell me more, but none of them really panned out on anything that's novel. Most of the genres are filled. So to make any splash at all, you got to be better than all of them. I'm not trying to dampen enthusiasm, but I am recommending cold, sober, rational thought about this. I mean, really good artists I know can't make a living at this. And yet I know that art demand is very, very high amongst several of the companies I'm familiar with. But they can't pay enough. if you could turn out 12 drawings a day, you'd still wouldn't make enough over the end of the week because you'd be burned out and you'd be done with the project. So my advice is consider you're going to do it as a hobby, a labor of love, a testament that you're going to leave to your descendants. And I'm not being facetious here. And then you're less likely to end up brokenhearted and frustrated. And, certainly I hope you're not going to go out and put one through your head. But I wouldn't, please don't go that far down the rabbit hole. That would not be good. Okay, let's see what's coming next. Okay, well, that's part of the last one. That one's finished. Oh, don't forget, Uncle Matt's RPG Studio. They do some neat stuff on there. Of course, Matt is just my friend. I don't charge him. He doesn't pay me for that little brief thing. Let's see what's coming up next. Oh, that's the last question. Okay. All right, here we go. This mapping question is like Frankenstein. It won't die. Referring back to an old topic, mapping. I ran a game yesterday for some young players, and I challenged them to map the dungeon. We had so many laughs. Each kid kept throwing maps, and the hilarious exchanges between the players over whose map was correct kept me laughing for hours. And they had so much fun. Well, okay. There you go. A new way to have fun with D&D. I'm okay with that. I'm sure as a DM, I know for a fact that I used to be greatly amused when the party would get into an argument about, hey man, you missed that turn back there. Where's that door? And it's a great source of fun for DMs. That's why I say you ought to keep doing it. Let's see. All right, I ran a player with just I ran a game once with just 3 players: a fighter, a dwarf, and an evil cleric. Suspecting a superior force of orcs ahead, the fighter and the dwarf began loudly declaring how much they like to eat orcs. When the ones failed to be afraid, those 2 psychopaths followed through and began savagely devouring each orc as it fell in when the survivors watching. It only got worse as the adventure progressed, and with the dwarf wearing a dead orc as a ghoulish suit. Eventually, orcs they encountered would immediately rout. Well, okay. If you can establish a reputation among orc kind, like, oh man, what's so bad? They're gonna only kill you. No, man, they're gonna eat you. I think that's hilarious. And kudos to Jolly Blackburn and Hackmaster, because a lot of their, I don't know, it might be all, but a bunch of their monster descriptions has a little chart at the bottom of the table of what parts are edible. I love it. Why not? Kill your own food. Beast is a beast, right? All right, let's see. That reminds me of that thing on Spartacus, Blood and Sand in the Pits. That guy wears the face of the last guy he killed. Oh man, is that macabre? I loved it. I watched an interesting thread run on Facebook for a couple of days. It's hard to tell when they start shouting in the echo chamber. But I watched it for a couple of days, and the original question was something to the effect of, would you allow a continual light spell to be used offensively? And my immediate answer was, hell yes. I used to reward my players for thinking up ingenious ways to use spells. And you'd be surprised what a lightning bolt will do into a stinking cloud or a gas cloud. If you work it right, you fill the room and then set it on fire when it all flashes. And to use the example of continual light, Lord knows it would be effective if you were to have a couple of staffs or staves with a continual light spell. If you're going in to fight bats or bugbears with their, light sensitive eyes, anything with anything you can see in the dark can't deal with bright light as a rule. Certainly not instantaneously. Even people, have to get rid of the purple spot before before anything happens. So there's lots of spells that can be used defensively. Somebody wrote and told me how they got so angry with somebody when they finally tracked him down. They turned flesh to mud and then mud to stone, and then and they killed it each time. And there's other ways. I, as a DM, would recommend that other DMs allow and encourage innovative uses of spells, because let's face it, it's all magic, hocus pocus. However, if the pseudoscience can justify it, why not? I don't see a reason why not. There's lots of other spells that I'm not going to go into here now that with a little clever devious thought can be found to run be used several different ways, and especially in an offensive put a repel spell, throw a repel spell on a goblin as they're running down the hall, and all of a sudden he's knocking down all the goblins around him because he's repelling them, and he doesn't even know why they're falling down. There's lots of different things you can do like that, and I used to encourage the heck out of it and still do. Of course, the games I run at cons now aren't nearly as convoluted, and you don't need maps and whatever, because we're just there to have some funs and laughs. And if anybody dies, it's no big deal because it's not their character. Let's see what else is on this page. Ooh, that. Did I miss anything here? Sorry for my mumbling, but I'm actually printing out bullet sheets of topics so I don't forget anything if I promised it. All right, would you speculate a bit about the impact D&D had on popular culture? Believe me, I have reflected the shit out of that over the last so many years. We know D&D eagerly embraced some aspects of literary pop culture like Fritz Leiber's Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, and some parts more reluctantly like Tolkien's literary milieu. Do you think the game, the cartoon, and the movies influenced the way sword and sorcery is depicted today? From the grittiness of the Conan barbarian movies in the 80s to the magic swords, monsters, and mysteries and dragon in today's Game of Thrones. Please don't take this wrong. Well, yeah. When I was watching the second Lord of the Rings movie, sitting there in a theater, big wide theater, watching all this going on, about 40 minutes or an hour into the movie, it just washed over me. I wouldn't even be watching this movie if it hadn't been for those first trees we cut down in 74 and 75, and those stumps we pulled in 75 and 76 and planted this crop and made it grow. Yeah, we did a lot of things to popular culture. We gave geeks and nerds something to enjoy amongst themselves. And if the other people didn't want to play, to hell with them. Geeks and nerds have been excluded from everything since their childhood. I know what it's like to be a really smart little kid, and nobody's, they're all a little leery around you. I know what it is to be the curve buster in high school, and what that entails. We created a new Esperanto. Esperanto, for those of you too young to remember, was this new glorious global language everybody was going to learn and everybody would be able to communicate. And like the metric system in the United States, it didn't do well in public opinion. But we did, in a sense, create both a safe haven, places where people that were fond of this type of stuff could find a place to be together, to identify with others, create and establish a camaraderie and a brotherhood, sisterhood type thing. And we watched, and I've had so many anecdotes about how people through this expression found their own voices and went on to do really good things. And I mean, I've told you about the really tall man in the white shirt and tie that stopped me at Gen Con one year and thanked me for keeping him and his two buddies out of mischief all one summer. And now he's an appellate court judge for the 6th district or something like this. Well, yeah, I know we did. Now, I'm not saying that we wove all this out of air and gossamer. No, we were a conduit. We were a funnel. We captured a lot of things that were going on. And if anybody says differently, they're not telling the truth. Tolkien was a big thing in the head shops because it was a bootleg edition. Tolkien poems or Dayglow posters were at every dorm room and everything, even if they hadn't read all the books. But this openness to fantasy was becoming was opening this venue, or this path into, was opening up with this stuff. The hippie drug culture didn't hurt because people were more open to try to, ooh, yeah, I want to be a dragon man, okay. And that didn't hurt. The sexual revolution didn't do much for us, as I've said about the story of the Eldritch Wizardry cover. But we were there, and we captured a lot of these strings, and we ran them through our weaving machine, and all those threads came together in that interesting pile, those bobbins spinning around. And yeah, I believe that we absolutely. Now, if you look at the quality of the movies, a lot of the grittier old movies, whether they were swords and sorcery or westerns, were low budget. They all had a certain look to them. Not the best film, or not the best camera, or not the best scene. I mean, they were low budget films. And so they tended to go for the violence and the gore and the grit and the realism. So yeah, the guys were sweaty and sweat ran down and the dirt went with it, and yeah, Conan was, big and all sweaty and everything. But as the public morphed into stuff like The Princess Bride, okay, and even Peter Falk got involved, and Mandy Patinkin, for goodness sakes, that problem, I can't say that it wouldn't have happened without us, but I know that we had a great hand in it. What did happen, we shaped and guided as far as we could. So I hope that answers your question without sounding like an egotist. But yeah, we did. We changed a lot of stuff. The stuff that they're writing today is much better. I mean, look at Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman, and there's several new really, really good writers that are writing really good our kind of stuff, fantasy, swords and sorcery, historical fantasy, this type of thing. And the writing is getting better now. There's a book market for what I talked about earlier. If you want to make money off this genre, write good novels, write good short stories, enough of them you can put in an anthology. Then you might do well. But to do well, you're going to have to be very novel. You're going to have to think of really interesting things and then give them away to everybody to stand out with your head above the rest of the crowd. Let's see what else we got here. Oh, we're moving ahead on the scythe front. We didn't get to play it this week because the person we thought was bringing the game thought somebody else was bringing the game, so we ended up playing Power Grid Deluxe again, which is also great fun. But I'm again, my continual fascination with Scythe is unabated. I even, God knows, I do not like Steam, but I spent the money to get it on Steam so I can start figuring out strategies by myself, just playing against 2 or 3 robots. Most of the other guys are doing it too, so I kind of had to. I was really screwed. Really screwed. Okay, now this is going to sound... All right, first somebody was wanting to know about war stories. I could tell you how I learned to be an expert at changing barrels and belts on an M Deuce, Ma Deuce, 50 cal. I could tell you what it's like to feel the impact of a big piece of shrapnel impact about 14 inches from your head, but that would mean going into other places. So someday I might tell him. I mean, golly, I've not even told Cheryl all the stuff I did over there because I didn't want her to worry then, and I don't see any reason to talk about it now. Gaming and life balance. How did it work for you? What advice would I give? It has worked as well as it has for me solely because my wife, Cheryl Ann Nee Weckner, is an incredibly understanding lady. From the very first, when we got married, it was understood that she had interests that I didn't have to do. I had interests that she didn't have to do. And in the very first year of our marriage, we established that. She liked going to pottery and, ceramics and stuff. And I went to, and that's why when we were in the Navy, the very first year I was married. Then we went to college, and we each had different things. We didn't have children. So that was a big freer of our ability to do that. But even after we started, having children, Cheryl's always, been really cool about, yeah, you like to play the games with your buddies. That's all cool. And she's really, really cool about me having them over here twice a month. And she plays on Wednesday. She bowls, and then she goes out with lunch with some people, and then she goes and plays canasta all afternoon with some other people. And on Thursday, all day she plays mahjong, and every 6 or 8 weeks it's at our house, and it was yesterday. So we have our own interest. We'd like to do things together. Don't get me wrong. I've had season tickets to FC Cincinnati for the last 2 years because she gave me the first year as something, get out off my butt, get out and get fresh air and get over my chemotherapy. And actually, I was still slightly in chemo when I went and came through it. And so we have different things. She's much more of a churchgoer now than I am. We still, we watch, we have several programs on TV we enjoy watching together each evening. But she likes to watch HGTV and stuff like that, and I like to watch History Channel, and it's cool because that's why you have more than one TV. So if you're thinking about going into a relationship, you got to think about how much in relation to your gaming, how much you do now, how much you're willing to give up, and if that other special someone is a gamer, then you need to sit down and talk about that, because you may have, I don't care if you met in the same group 3 years ago and decided to get married, you're bound to have other games that you like to play. Somebody's going to like Ticket to Ride, and somebody else is going to like Scythe, or Power Grid Deluxe. It's important. I didn't game for a number of years. Because my old group kind of fell apart because they started getting married and having kids, and I'd already had a considerable head start. And I left the industry, and for 20 years I did something else, and I didn't game very often. I played poker when I could, my wife's a very good. She plays very good cribbage. She plays very good backgammon. She's a very good gin player. I was very good at cribbage and a couple of games I wish I never taught her. So, you know, we would do that kind of stuff, but wargaming, no. That didn't come back until college, and I'd gotten into the club at the college and resumed my gaming love, and it just, like I'd never left, and before I knew it, I was at TSR. And she was willing to move with me to take a shot on this silly game and move with me to Wisconsin and put down new roots. Now, the thing I have not mentioned up to this point is game balance and life balance. If you're trying to make a living at gaming, forget it. If my wife hadn't been a registered nurse, the poor wages I did make during my stint in the gaming industry would never been enough to support her and my 2 children and myself. So, you know, there's big publishers that only pay 3, 4, if you're lucky, 5 cents a word to write for them. Well, figure out how many words that is you got to write and how good you have to be at writing them to figure out how you can make any kind of money. I know 1 or 2 people who are prodigious and extremely talented writers that probably fit that mold, but they also do stuff on the side. So game balance and life balance, never take too much away to game with and give up on the life part. Your children, your wife, your relationships, your home. You know, it's not what I know of engagements that were broken at a game table because somebody's character in game wooed another NPC of the opposite sex and seduced them, and in fact, I've heard of 2 like that have broken up over that, but that's a rare exception. My God, I've been doing this since 1974. Count the years. I don't like to. Any unfulfilled gaming related things you would like to accomplish? Yes. Like I said, I've got plans to sell, I believe, most of my old unpublished. And in doing that, I also intend to, I have 3 left that I want to write. All 3 in a manner that I don't believe anybody's ever done before. And we'll see. I will write them. Whether I get them published or not, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure I can work a deal and get them, you know, to me, last shit. But yeah, I have a couple of goals left unfulfilled. I never got to see either of my children become state champion soccer players. I never won a big, fat, huge amount of money in the lottery. You know, writing goals. Yeah, I got some goals, but man, I'll be 70 in January, and I've done an awful lot of stuff that, you know, I don't feel like I'm. Could I do more stuff? Sure, but I don't feel like I've, you know, missed out on stuff. I go to 4 cons, maybe a couple new ones next year. I'm hoping. Knock on wood. Knock, knock, knock. And we're going to end with this. Forgetting that setting, content, and story are usually what dictates the content. What's my archetypical dungeon? What themes and times spring to mind when a word comes up? You go for the Forgotten Jungle Temple. Yes. I did that in Snake Riders of the Arredondo. And I did that as a desert temple in the Curse of the Weaver Queen. Moist, dank, sprawling medieval labyrinth, troll-infested ship smashed into a lighthouse, etc., etc. Well, when I set out to write an adventure, I don't like, except at a con. But if it's, you know, if it's something it's going to be a campaign, or, you know, at least several playings in your campaign as a test or whatever. Let's see. I don't like to plop you right down at the door. Though I have done that at cons. But when I write them, I like some outdoor adventure to it. I believe the outdoor adventuring has been overlooked. There's wild animals that are every bit as dangerous as spell slingers, and just as likely to kill you without you knowing it. A temple is good. A ruined city is good. Has to have some underground, obviously. But I could just as easily have fun if I had the time and energy to sit down and do an enormous multi-level, huge dungeon, like On the Order of the One, that's kind of described in black and white in your first 3 books, where you got layer after layer and sub-levels and all that. I could probably do that. But again, it all comes to the ecology of the adventure. I like to use the ecology. I like to use the weather. I like to have stuff like static electricity around to do possible harm or possible good. The troll ship crashed over the lighthouse. That sounds like a neat idea. I do have an adventure partially put together of seagoing dwarves. The mountain range they lived in, there was an earthquake, and some of it submerged and some of it didn't. And so they found themselves, their very high peak that they had tunneled into, they found themselves isolated with, miles and miles. It's kind of like that Cam Bay in Vietnam with 1,000 little islands all over. And they're seagoing dwarves, and their ships are filled with mechanical gene. They don't bother with cannons when they have crossbows that have grappling hooks on them. And so I like breaking molds. Dwarves supposedly don't like water. Well, I wanted to make seagoing dwarves that were just nasty and badass as hell. So I like breaking expectations, and I like breaking what you think you know. I want people to learn as they go, like we did back in the day, because I think that's the joy of the game, is learning as you go, figuring it out. Well, I don't care whether it's Hero Wars or Troll Lord games, Castle and Crusades, or any RPG, Swords and Wizardry, whatever. It's there. So my variety dungeon is never know what to expect. I have a second one unpublished that maybe me in the published batch. It's a follow-up to Arredondo, where they're going into and out of all these cenotes, which are these underground reservoirs in very porous limestone. So they're going in and out of those and braving the danger of what else might be in there. And so I really don't think there is a quite typical one. And that runs me down, I think, out of time. It's probably been too long. We'll post this one right away. I'm not worried about the leader. Don't forget to vote. Register if you aren't. And if you aren't and you haven't yet, I'm going to come haunt you. And all your rolls will be shit crits. Vote. See you at Gamehole Con. And don't forget, my new guy, I'll make sure there's no glare on there, Chris Korsak, board seller, buys and sells. Seems like a really nice fellow. So you ought to give him a shot. And on that note, I'm going to hit the red button that says